Hi, this is Alan Shea, and I'm hosting today our society show with a special story in mind that I'm honored to bring to everyone who's viewing this show. It is my great honor to be next to my favorite cousin and the matriarch of our family.
They didn't want nobody to know about that because it don't look good and it sure don't sound good when family, raping in the family. When they can just go on out there and get them a girlfriend. Why would you want to mess with your sister or your brother? Why? That's a disgrace.
So, would you share with the viewers and the family members, was that a common practice and it was just silence, or was it something that was not that common and people just wouldn't talk about it?
They didn't talk about it, but it was kind of most of the black family. It was in each family. It was one messing with his sister or her brother. But they try to keep it a secret because it's embarrassing. You shouldn't be having intimate with your family. That's the last thing you should do.
So why don't you share with the viewers and family members, once your mother abandoned you and your dad gave you over to Grandma Lucy, how did you and Rena connect up? Because you actually grew up with Rena, my mom, as sisters more than just cousins.
Yeah, right. Well, how that happened was after my grandmother died. 'Cause I stayed with her until she died, 1939. Then I moved with my Aunt Rena and Uncle Jesse. And I stayed with her until I got married.
Now, Rena was living with you and Grandma Lucy, though, correct? My understanding, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, was that both you and Rena, that you, Rena, Arthur, and your brother, the four children, were all raised by your grandmother.
It was
Grandma.
5 of us.
Okay, so who was those 5?
It was me, Arthur, Gladys, Emma. Let me see who else. And Honey, your mother.
Right. So we have. So for clarity for the viewers in the family. So my mother, Rena Hill, her brother Arthur Newson, you,
Yes.
your other sister.
No, Gladys,
So who was Gladys?
my first cousin.
Oh, so we had other cousins.
Yeah,
Okay.
Gladys and Emma.
Okay, so Gladys and Emma were cousins.
Sisters.
Right, but they were your cousins.
Yeah, first cousin.
Okay, so those first cousins came from what parents? Do you remember who their parents were?
Gladys and Emma was from Fanny, my aunt.
Okay. And the reason why this is very important for family members and those of you who are viewing this show here is the relationships that formed with non-traditional relationships. I'm going to put it that way. And all of the children that were a product of these non-traditional relationships, we'll call it, found themselves living with their grandmother.
Right.
And so, and trying to be very clear with my cousin here about, here we have, so for viewing purposes, there were approximately 5 children, young people, living with their grandparents, basically about the same age.
Yeah.
And so my mother, Lucille here, Gladys. Now, who was the closest in age? Gladys, or what was her sister's name?
Emma.
So Emma was your age, or Gladys
Oh,
was your?
no. Emma was older,
Emma was older.
and Gladys, I'm trying to think, but she older than me? I think she was, yeah. Gladys was older than I am.
By 1 or 2 years, or real close.
Maybe 1 or 2 years older.
Okay. So for us to understand the dynamics again of the culture and how the quality of life was in this period, certainly in the South, the grandmother would raise her grandchildren, and she can have, in our case, as many as 5 young kids that she's raising, as well as her own kids.
Right.
And so in this instance, in talking to our cousin, it was clear that there were a number of young kids in the household for at least a 10-year period, from you being about 9 months of age until you were about 10
Yeah.
or 11 years old.
Right.
Okay. And the reason why we try and get this clarification and sharing with you viewers and family members is because my mother, Rena Shea, it was Rena Hill Shea, she used to share with us how difficult and how hard it was being raised by her grandmother that she lived with until she died.
Right.
And she
Moved
moved with her grandfather, who was Dave Newsom.
Right.
Okay, or I should say Dave Newsom Sr. And it was even more difficult. Right, extremely difficult, because now she's living with a man instead of the love and culture of a woman. It's the struggles and the mindset of a male, which was in those days extremely different that she had to encounter, and she shared those kinds of things with us. I found it very interesting once I started looking at the dynamics of our family. We always seem to have a very productive family. I mean, it seemed like everybody in my family, as I started to look back, were entrepreneurs.
Right.
And to your knowledge, we've always owned our own farms and land. Would you say that would be the case?
Yes.
And so do you have any knowledge of where that may have come from, or how did that happen?
Not really. Unless they inherited from the older mother, grandmother, or great-grandmother, grandfather, one or two. Maybe they left it to them.
And do you recall or have any knowledge of Dave Newsom and Lucy Brooks ever having a divorce or having separate quarters at any time?
And she left him. I don't know when that was, but I know she left him after they had kids. The kids stayed with him, and he raised them. He raised his children that he had by mama. So that part, that's all I know about that. After she had the 3 kids, I guess she left him. So he kept the kids.
So the reason I was asking this question is because when I was growing up in Mississippi, we used to always go back to Bolton, like on Sundays, because my mom's church was there.
Yeah.
And what was the name of that church? Do you remember?
Brownville.
Oh, Brownville. Okay.
That was the name of the church.
So we would literally, when I was a kid in Mississippi, go out to Bolton and go to church at Brownville Church.
Yeah.
And Brownville Church used to have an outhouse
Yeah.
to where when you had to go to the restroom, you'd have to go to the outhouse.
Yes.
And it was not the most glamorous experience that you could have after going inside of a church. But it was the way that the rural area was established. And even to this day, the church is still there.
Oh, yes.
So
They done probably remodel. They remodeled all those churches, all of them. Brownville, Orange Hill, Hall Chapel, all of them.
So the reason I'm gonna go back to our discussion of farms and being entrepreneurs, the reason why I asked Lucille whether she recall or had any knowledge of the ownership of our land as blacks in the South is because even today, our family on the Newsom side still own our farm in Bolton, Mississippi. And because of our family name being the Newsom, my brother and I, when we went to Mississippi in 2015, we were literally able to trace our initial family establishment from 1855 as a result of Newsom migration from Oregon. And it was a white family who migrated to Bolton for purposes of being involved with agriculture and cotton. And they had a 10-year-old son at the time when they migrated. And I found out that my great-great-great-grandfather on the Newsom side actually fought in the Civil War. He was an officer in the war. And after the war was over, his son was becoming an adult. And by 1870, after the Civil War, he had a son with a black woman his son was the product of a black woman who became my great-great-great-grandfather, Osmond Newsom.
Oh, my goodness.
Right. So do you remember that?
Uh-uh.
Okay. So Osmond Newsom actually was Dave Newsom's father.
Right.
So we were able to trace all of this back, which helped our family on the Newsom side. And we usually trace the Newsom side of our family to our current existing family, even today, as the Shea family. The Newsom family is really our core family name because it always have the direct lineage of offspring, so we're able to trace it a lot easier. First generation removed from slavery was Osmond Newsom. The second was Dave Newsom Sr. The third was Georgia Newsom, which was my grandmother. The fourth was Rena Hill Shea, which is my mother. I, Alan Shea, is the fifth. And all my nephews and nieces behind me, which we had counted up over about 50 at the time, would be the sixth generation. I have a seventh generation, an eighth generation, and we have a ninth. We've counted a ninth generation of offsprings. And my mother, currently, we've counted over 160 offsprings from my mother. So that's how many offsprings that we currently have in existence. And we're working on gathering up all the names and creating an updated family tree, because the last time we actually created a family tree was in 2000 2009. And in 2009, both my cousin Lucille Banks and my mother both turned 80 in 2009. And in that particular year, we had a big party for my mom, an 80th birthday party. And we presented her with a family tree. And that's how I was able to at least identify at the time her grandfather and her great-grandfather, which, as I said, started with Osmond Newsom, who was the first removed from slaves. And because he was the product of a white father and a black mother, he was never part of a slave family from that perspective. However, his mother was. And we were unable to trace the name of his mother and his mother's side of the family. So we were unable to do that. But because we follow the lineage of the father's side in the last name, we were able to do that with keeping an understanding of our family name, which again is the Newsoms from that perspective. So we bring these things to the attention of you as viewers because we know in today's society there are methods in which you can trace your family, whether that's through an ancestry type model that's out there or through DNA. It's available. I think it's imperative that in today's climate, we as people try and find that, because not only are we more in tune with knowing that practically all families have some kind of dysfunction or some kind of challenges. The other thing that I am learning that exists is the mental challenges that are out there that runs through these families, and many of the families do not discuss them or make other family members aware that somewhere down our family line, someone could have a mental challenge. And so these things are being brought to the forefront more and more. So why don't you share with us, before we kind of wind this down, I wanted to get a little bit more clear of an understanding. You had indicated earlier that you live with our Aunt Rena Love. Can you share with us how was that growing up once you moved with her? Because I understand you were about 11 years old, and you indicated that you lived with her until you were married. So can you give us a little insight what that experience was about?
Yes. When I moved with my aunt, Rena Love, it was very, very good. She was very good to me. She taken good care of me, dressed me up. She loved to dress, and she dressed me too. I wore all kind of lace, 'cause she loved lace from head to toe.
Now, can you share with us if she had any kids?
No, she didn't have no kids of her own. That's why she, well, I said adopted, but they didn't, because her brother gave my brother to her when he was 2 months, John Hunt. No, J.W. His name is J.W. at birth. So she raised him from 2 months old, because her and her husband didn't have no children.
So you and John Hunt was raised by Aunt Rena as her own kids, which basically meant that she was raising and poured all that love into you as though you were her biological kids, and you got that. And that was somewhere between the ages of 11 years old until you got married. And what age were you when you got married?
I'd say about 16. Yeah, 'cause they had to sign for me.
So you were 16 years old when you got married? Okay. Well, and for those of you who are watching this show and family members who are watching it, we think about 16 years old as something very hard to believe people would allow their young children or young people to get married, even though my mom had her first child at 15. So,
Yeah.
you know, these kind of things apparently were very commonplace incidents back during this time. So once you were married, where did you meet your husband?
In Chicago.
Okay. So share with the family and the viewers. Now, how did you go from Bolton, Mississippi to Chicago?
We came to Chicago in 1944.
And when you say we, who are you referring to?
Aunt Rena, myself, and my brother John Hunt.
Okay. So Aunt Rena used to live in Bolton, Mississippi, and she
Oh,
moved
yes.
to Chicago.
Yes.
And do you have any knowledge of what caused her to move here to Chicago, or?
Well, she was farming at the time. But then, you know, after her and her husband, you know, separated, and she said she don't need to live in the country no more. So her brother, Isaiah, sent for her. He paid our way to come to Chicago, and we was living with him. We lived with him until what? I think until I got married. Yeah, we lived with him until I got married. Aunt Rena, myself, and my brother John, Jada, big brother. So after I got married, because I met my husband here in Chicago. At the time he was in service. He was home on leave for 30 days. In that 30 days, he asked for my hand in marriage.
So let me make sure I'm clear on this, because I'm hearing some stuff, and I want all you viewers to see how things worked back in 1930 something. And why don't you share with them? This was, I'm assuming, World War II that he was a part of. Okay,
yeah.
Because we want to make sure the viewers follow us on each step, because there was the Korean War that followed in the early 50s. But at this point, he was a military man who
Right.
was active from World War II.
Right.
And you're saying that you met him on leave, and
on leave.
and you were with him. Let me make sure I got this right. For 30 days before.
He was home for 30 days.
Oh, he was home for 30 days. But how long
Right.
had you known him before he asked you to marry him?
I didn't.
Okay, so how long did you know him?
Like I said, he was home for 30 days. And I met him while he's on leave. And his father had been, you know, telling him about me, what a nice young lady I was. And he said he wanted to meet this young lady. So when he came home, we went to see him at his father's house. And in that 30 days, he asked for my hand in marriage. He presented a engagement ring, put it on my finger. But we didn't get married then. We was engaged for a year. That was when he came home. He was getting out. He said, I'm going to wait until I get out before I marry. So when he got out, we got married June the 1st, 1946.
Okay. So, for clarity, so you met your husband when you were about 15?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You you after 30 days of meeting him, he proposed to you,
Yeah,
and you were engaged for a year.
right.
So you were 17 when you got married?
16.
So that meant you must have been 15 when you met him.
Yeah,
Okay. So you were 15 when you met him. After 30 days, he proposed, and you dated him or you were engaged for about a year before you got married to him.
right.
And during your marriage, you and he had 7 kids together or 9?
9.
Okay, so you had 9 kids. Now here is going to be the $1 million question, okay? Name all of your children that was the product of your marriage, and each of these children are all from just you and your husband, and that has been the case with you throughout your entire life.
Right.
So why don't you share with us the name of your 9 children that you've brought throughout their lives, and you've had a great opportunity to see them grow up.
Donna, Micah, Antonia, Jane, Robert, Loretta, Leon, and Alicia.
Wow, that's to all of our children who just heard their mom echo the names of her 9 children: Donna, Michael, James, Robert, Loretta, Janetta, Leon, and Alicia. You are blessed. You're blessed to see your mom reach an incredible age of 93, and who has shepherded all of you to your adulthood with with grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and great-great-grandchildren. And in closing, I would love for my cousin here to share with us, as we go back through a family journey, what can you share about your relationship with your cousins, certainly my mom, and the children that my mom had, realizing she had 13 children?
But with her, we was close, very close. We was more like sisters instead of cousin, first cousin, because we lived together, played together, ate together, slept together.
And so were you able to...
And went to partially school together.
And so were you able to have any kind of real interaction or relationship to her 13 children?
Well, partially, because after I left Mississippi, we were still close, but we were distant apart, because she was still there in Mississippi and I was in Chicago. But until then, we was together all those years because of my grandmother.
And would you share with the viewers and family members, so at what point did you and Rena reconnect to recultivate that sister relationship that you had, so that your children and her children can form a closer bond?
I'm trying to think what year was that. Because after she moved to California, I didn't see her no more for, I don't even know how many years. It was years before I found her again. And when I did, I got her phone number and I called her. And one of the kids answered the phone. And they said, "Mama, is somebody in your past call?" She said her name is Lucille Banks, and she's your first cousin. And she called you honey, and they never heard that name.